Hello everyone, and welcome to the Baypointe Property Brownfield Designation Discussion. I'm Tony Fabrizio with Pinellas County Marketing and Communications, and I'll be your moderator tonight. In a moment, I'll introduce you to our host, Public Works Director Kelly Hammer-Levy. But first, let me give you a quick overview of how the meeting will go. First, Kelly will provide some opening comments, and then we will play a narrated presentation. When the presentation is over, our panelists will introduce themselves. After that, the panelists will be available to answer your questions. We should have about 30 minutes for that portion of the program. Now for a little housekeeping. If you are new to Zoom, place your cursor at the bottom of the screen. A toolbar will appear. Clicking on the Q&A icon opens a screen where you can type in your questions. Feel free to send in questions at any time. They will be answered after the presentation. Please note that we'll be taking questions typed into the Q&A first, so we can cover as much ground as possible within our allotted time. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available for viewing within the next couple of days on the project website, pinellascounty.org/Baypointe. Please share that link with any of your neighbors who could not be with us tonight. At this time, I would like to introduce Public Works Director Kelly Hammer-Levy to make opening comments.
Well, thank you, Tony, and thank all of you for spending your evening with us to learn more about the Brownfield program and the benefits the program will bring to the future of this property as a park. Your feedback will help guide our next steps. As Tony said, please use the Q&A tool to submit your questions. Your questions will then be answered live by Jennifer, our project manager, and Dan, our Brownfield program manager, after the presentation. If you don't want to submit comments or questions tonight, that is fine too. By visiting pinellascounty.org/Baypointe, you have access to our phone numbers, emails, and an electronic comment form. That information will also be shared on the screen at the end of the meeting. And again, thank you for being here. As Tony said, please share the link to the site with others that could not be here and ask that they also send in their feedback. We really want to hear from all of you. With that, I will turn the mic back over to Tony. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. The video we're about to play is also posted at pinellascounty.org/Baypointe, so you can watch it at any time. This will cover the history of the property, explain the Brownfield program, and explain why we believe a Brownfield designation would be beneficial. Please give me just a few seconds while I tee this video up. Today's virtual informational open house will discuss the former Baypointe Golf Course. We will discuss the site history, Brownfield Basics, the Brownfield Process, and existing brownfields. Let's start with the history of Baypointe. Through a review of aerials, it was determined the Baypointe Golf Course was constructed around 1970. Around 1976, the clubhouse and the maintenance warehouse were developed. In the last few years, the course was neglected and closed. In February 2020, the county purchased Baypointe. From March to May 2020, the county cleaned up the site so that it could remain open to the public. The cleaning up included clearing significant amounts of vegetation from the ponds, mowing, and performing minor repairs to the former cart path. Since the county purchased the site, other activities have occurred. Topographic survey has been acquired for design. The bathrooms were removed. An environmental consultant was retained for assistance with the Brownfield process. The county has finalized a scope of work with a stormwater consultant. The county will provide opportunities for feedback on the design at a later time. Please refer to the county website for the schedule. Brownfield Basics. As the county is considering designating Baypointe as a brownfield, we would like to share the basics of brownfield designations with you. To describe what the Baypointe Golf Course Brownfield designation would mean to you, we will provide information on the purpose of the Brownfield program, describe the Brownfield process, and explain the benefits of a Brownfield designation. What is a brownfield? Brownfields are properties where reuse may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of environmental contamination. These are properties that, if contaminants are unaddressed, may have a negative impact on the local community and may be an obstacle for reuse of an area. Reuse and revitalization. The Brownfield designation process allows property owners to access federal resources and technical assistance throughout the life of the project. The designation process ensures that local community stakeholders are identified and given opportunities to participate through informational meetings, community forums, and public hearings. This ensures that the future use of the Brownfield site meets both community and reuse goals while improving the area. The Brownfield process. Suggestions for Brownfield redevelopment sites can come from community members, property owners, developers, real estate agents, or government planning and development boards. A Phase 1 environmental site assessment is completed for the selected site to determine the presence of potential environmental contamination. A Phase 2 environmental site assessment is conducted if the Phase 1 investigation indicates the likely presence of contamination. After the site investigation is complete, the entity responsible for requesting a Brownfield designation will conduct informational open houses and hold public hearings to disseminate information to the public and stakeholders. After collecting and reviewing stakeholder input, a resolution may be passed by the Board of County Commissioners designating the site as a brownfield. If the site is designated as a brownfield, the county will enter into an agreement with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection outlining the work to be completed. This will also allow the county to apply for reimbursement of certain costs during the site cleanup. The Baypointe Brownfield designation process. Information gathered during the previous redevelopment efforts indicate that low-level contamination exists at the Baypointe Golf Course from the historic use of pesticides and herbicides for turf management. This low-level contamination is not immediately harmful to residents or pets, but can pose a long-term risk. It must be addressed as part of any site reuse activities. The Florida Department of Environmental Protection has established safe levels of contamination for several types of land use, including industrial, residential, and recreational use. Pinellas County is proposing to clean the site to meet recreational land use requirements. This is consistent with the end use as a stormwater treatment center and conservation area. Pinellas County is now seeking input from you on the proposed Baypointe Brownfield designation. The virtual informational open house is designed to provide the community with information about the site and future plans for reuse. A comment form has been provided to collect feedback and questions about this project. A virtual public information meeting will be held on September 29th to answer questions about the proposed Brownfield designation and address feedback received. Public hearings may be held with the Board of County Commissioners after the next meeting if there is community support. The Board of County Commissioners must adopt a formal resolution designating the former Baypointe Golf Course as a brownfield site. This is the final step needed before work can begin on site assessment. A copy of the resolution is sent to the Department of Environmental Protection to begin the process of developing a brownfield site rehabilitation agreement. The Brownfield Site Rehabilitation Agreement lays out responsibilities and cleanup limits. The agreement is part of the process for receiving approval from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, stating that the site has been cleaned to a level appropriate for its intended use. As part of the approval, a deed restriction will be placed on the property, limiting its future use as a passive park. Prior to reuse as a park, the low-level contamination at the site must be clearly defined. This means Pinellas County will conduct additional site assessments to collect soil and groundwater samples from various locations throughout the property. Statistical models of soil contamination will be created to define areas of concern. All site investigations are reviewed and approved by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection before starting to ensure compliance with state guidelines. The results from the additional site investigations will be used in the site design process. This information will be used to determine where and how much soil may be excavated or moved across the site during construction. Local brownfield examples. Here are the areas in Pinellas County designated as brownfield areas or sites. The next slides show examples of successful redevelopment of brownfield sites in our area. A complete listing of brownfield area and site designations can be found on the Florida Department of Environmental Protection Brownfield Division website. The former landfill at 126th Avenue North was situated along 126th Avenue and the Cross Bayou Canal. Years of improper operation and disposal left the land covered with construction debris and unsuitable for development. Funding through the EPA Brownfields program allowed the county to purchase and rehabilitate the property without assuming liability for the contamination. The site will soon be offered for sale. 3 illegal dump sites located in the Dansville area were identified and remediated in cooperation with the Environmental Protection Agency. The presence of the landfills prevented the neighborhood from growing and discouraged investment and redevelopment. The removal of the landfills allowed multiple parcels to be sold and redeveloped into affordable housing by Habitat for Humanity. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us via the email addresses or phone numbers provided on the next slide. Thank you for reviewing our virtual open house. At this time, our 2 panelists who developed the content you just viewed are going to make a few introductory comments. First, let me introduce Jennifer Shannon, Project Manager for the Baypointe Stormwater Conservation Area. And Jennifer, if you would remember to please to turn your video on.
All right. Good evening. My name is Jennifer Shannon, and I'm an engineer and the Baypointe Project Manager. I have more than 20 years of experience and have been with Pinellas County since 2018. The county purchased the former Baypointe Golf Course to use for stormwater improvements, conservation, and open passive recreation. Our budget for the site's cleanup is linked to the Brownfield designation, which is the purpose of today's meeting. Environmental assessment and cleanup, whether we obtain the designation or not, will occur in spring to summer 2021, and the design of the stormwater and conservation elements of the area occur at the same time. The assessment and drainage study will assist the county with grant applications to help cover some of the construction costs. And now I will hand this back to Tony.
Thanks, Jennifer. At this time, please meet Environmental Program Manager Dan Nedvedek, our Brownfield Program Manager. Dan, if you would also please make sure your video's on.
Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Dan Nedvedek, the Brownfield Program Manager for this project. I have more than 10 years of experience working for both public and private organizations with a primary focus on the assessment and remediation of contaminated property. We're here today because we believe securing a Brownfield designation for the Baypointe Stormwater and Conservation Area would be a win-win for the county and local residents. The Brownfield program offers the county the opportunity to recover a portion of the cost associated with assessment and remediation, and the residents benefit from multiple opportunities for input through public meetings and participation on the Brownfield Advisory Committee. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have tonight, and I'll turn it back over to Tony.
Thanks, Dan. At this time, we're going to move into the question and answer portion of the program. Again, we're going to first take questions entered into the Q&A. Just click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type in your question. After that, as time permits, we'll take verbal questions and brief comments. For those questions, use the raised hand button on your screen or press *9 on your phone. If there are any questions we don't get to, you'll be able to reach out to us through the contact information we'll provide at the end of the program. I'm now going to introduce Susan Goebel-Canning, our Stormwater and Vegetation Division Director, and she'll moderate the Q&A portion of the meeting. Susan?
Good evening, everyone. We want to take your questions specifically about designating Bayfield as a brownfield site. We're going to first take questions through the Q&A, and if you see the bottom there, you can go ahead and click that Q&A button. Oh, getting a prompt to start my video. There you go. And after that, if time permits, we'll take some verbal questions and comments. For those, please use the raised hand button at the bottom of your screen or press the *9 on your phone. Our first question is, are you doing this to develop Baypointe for affordable housing in the future? Linda McDowell and this community worked hard and long to prevent that.
No, we will not be developing Baypointe for affordable housing in the future. If you heard it in the presentation at all, cleaning the site to recreational limits will limit its use to recreational only.
Will we have access from Oakhurst Road?
That is something that can be developed as we develop the site plans for the ultimate project of the park.
Has any groundwater contamination been documented? If so, what direction is it moving?
There has been some low-level groundwater contamination documented in 2 of the monitoring wells that are on the site right now. As of now, it's fairly static. The plume is not spreading and it's all within the boundaries of the site. We're going to obviously do some more delineation work, but we don't expect to turn up anything surprising.
I often see people feeding wildlife and have seen a heron approach walkers. What can be done to educate the public about the potential harm done by feeding wildlife? And we may want to take these type of questions later. We
can put signage out there now, or we can put signage out there later. I do know that there are some very aggressive ducks from my experience out there. You can be chased by ducks.
And just to let everyone know, we do plan on having future meetings where we'll just talk about the project itself. The Brownfield designation has a lot of benefits. Are there any drawbacks or negatives to such a designation?
The easy answer for me is no. This property is going to be remediated, whether it's a brownfield designation or whether it has a brownfield designation or not. For us, I don't see any drawbacks for the community or the county.
Will nearby properties be tested?
We're going to start with testing the property boundaries to see if any contamination is off-site. If in what I consider a very small possibility of that happening, then we'll work with individual property owners for testing on their properties. But as of now, everything has been more on the interior of the site, so we're not really expecting to see anything off the property line.
Can you please give us more information regarding, is it typical for a golf course to be designated as brownfields, or is this property unique?
It's very typical for a golf course that's being reused to have a brownfield designation. There are several happening in Florida right now, and several happened in the last 2 years. We can probably put some more information about that up on our website if needed too.
Thank you for hosting this virtual open house. Please confirm that I heard this correctly. The plan is now and will continue to be recreational use as a passive park only. Your examples of other brownfield sites included resale and housing development.
The goal is to keep this as recreational use only. A deed restriction would limit what can go there, and what will go there and be there is a passive park.
And that's kind of what's exciting about this one for Pinellas County, is that usually we focus on housing redevelopment or industrial redevelopment. But right now we've got a chance to preserve a nice big chunk of green space that doesn't come up too often in the county. So we're committed to keeping this as open space.
Can you please give us more information regarding what the deed restriction as a passive park would be and more detail about the impact of it?
We would be guaranteeing that the 40 acres is open space in perpetuity.
Phase 1 or phase 2, is that done?
A phase 2 was done by a prospective purchaser in early 2019 before the county stepped in and bought the property. We'll be working with the state, developing a sampling or a site assessment plan, and we'll be doing our own testing.
If the county does get Brownfield money, would the savings be used for other aspects of the project? And if so, do you have any examples?
That's all you, Dan.
I think right now that I'm not sure where the savings would go, because the way that this works is the county is reimbursed for a portion of the cost. So the county still puts the money up front, and then we get tax credits on a percentage of what we spend for rehabilitation, remediation, and assessment. So if there's an opportunity as the project moves along, when we submit our, our reimbursement request each year, then yes, I think we could probably put that money to use on the project. But I can't say that for sure.
I'll jump in a little bit. So the question about that, one of the things that anytime we can bring in outside funding, it helps us do more. So we have a project budget, and any additional revenue we can bring in through grants and through the Brownfield program then allows us to better fully utilize our budget to meet other project goals. So basically it helps us expand our budget a little bit. So it's always a good thing.
Who is your environmental consultant?
Terracon is helping us with this process right now.
What is the timing if you're successful in your application? And what is the timeline for cleanup?
Go for it, Jennifer.
Oh, the timeline for cleanup is spring to summer of 2021. And there would be, and this is a big if you are supportive of the Brownfield designation, there would be hearings in December and January, but that's a big if.
Is the property available to be sold after remediation?
No.
Thank you for holding the meeting. Just want to make sure that designating Baypointe as a brownfield will not change the plans for it being a green space. Have heard that at times the brownfield designation has repurposed the lands that have been designated.
We intend to keep it green space.
What is the timeline for the entire brownfield process?
Well, I think like Jennifer said, if we get public support for this, we hope to take this before the board for the first of 2 meetings in December. And then we go through the rest of the FDEP process. So we've got to put together an action plan for them on how we're going to clean up the site, who's going to be responsible, what contractors we're using. But we anticipate the assessment portion of it starting in spring 2021. The whole timeline for it really just depends on what our final design ends up looking like.
How much additional funding does the Brownfield determination offer?
Because it's a reimbursement and it depends on how much we end up spending. But generally right now, what we're looking at for these first couple phases, each site is eligible for about $500,000 worth of reimbursement.
Thank you for dredging the ponds. Is future vegetation in pond acceptable?
In the future, we'll put the ponds on an operations and maintenance schedule, and we will take care of them as we program into the project.
I noticed the lawns are being cared for. However, there continues to be debris and material throughout the area. Can it be cleaned up now, or does it have to be post-designation?
That's a separate issue that we can address at a later time.
Will the property be closed for use while the work is being completed?
We will most likely cone off or separate the areas where we're doing assessments, but we will leave as much of the park open, or we will leave as much of the area open for walking as we work through the process.
How extensive might the soil removal be, and what is a time frame?
We want to keep soil removal to a minimum. We don't want to deal with moving potentially contaminated soil around or sending it off-site for treatment or disposal. So we'll work with our designers to look at different engineering and institutional controls for keeping contaminated material out of everyone's way and, disturbing it as little as possible.
How much initial boundary testing will you be doing?
We're still in negotiations with FDEP. They've reviewed our initial work plan, but we're probably looking at something like every 500 to 750 feet around the perimeter of the property, taking a soil sample.
What portion of the property has the test wells on it?
I can share a document to the website a little later if that would help, that shows the 8 existing groundwater wells. There will be more wells placed probably during our continued assessment, but I don't have a proposed location for those yet.
Can you tell us more about the trees that are marked?
Those were surveyed for the topographical survey to help build to help design the project.
With COVID-19 budget shortfalls, will this delay the project in any way?
No.
Would homeowners who are on Baypointe property ever have the possibility to purchase part of the property behind their homes?
No, this property was purchased for stormwater and recreational uses.
Will you make the data for phase 2 investigations available?
Yes, since we're considering entering this into the Brownfield program, all of that will be publicly available data and will be shared on the FDEP website.
What would we expect to see as far as activity in 2021?
From the Brownfield side, you can expect to see some sampling, well installation, well sampling, and soil sampling, probably first and second quarter of the year. And then I think the rest of it is some design time. Correct, Jennifer?
Yes. Yes.
What does the cleanup actually entail?
We don't actually know yet because we haven't completely defined all the areas of contamination, but generally it'll be a removal of contaminated soil.
And then as a follow-up, there was a question whether removing the buildings would be part of the Brownfield cleanup.
No, that's a separate decision that's pending other information to finalize those decisions.
I see several questions about what exactly is a passive park, and if you could give some examples of what recreational use is.
A passive park is a park where you have trails and opportunities for people to essentially entertain themselves. You're not going to see lots of equipment going out there. What you're going to see is a means for you to get some cardio and walk your dog and enjoy yourself out in the sun while you're outside checking out the birds if you like to.
How will you determine that you have public support for the Brownfield project?
Well, I think what we're doing right now is an important piece of that. And that's why we encourage everyone to submit questions if they have them, or to get in contact with Jennifer and I. There's also a comment form on the Baypointe Brownfield website you can use too.
Describe how residential property values will be affected.
Honestly, I don't think you're going to see any impact on your property values. I can't say that specifically. I can't give you a definitive answer on that, but the site is going to be remediated whether we go through the Brownfield process or not. It's either going to be an FDEP waste cleanup site or a Brownfield site. The Brownfield site has benefits like allowing us to get reimbursed for some of the costs to offset the project. That wouldn't be available to us if we did not go through the Brownfield process. Again, I don't see any real advantage in not going through this process. I don't think it's going to affect your values at all.
What does a water treatment facility entail?
A water treatment facility, it's not when you think about drinking water, it's about surface water, and a surface water facility entails dry ponds or wet ponds, or essentially a means to treat stormwater.
When will you begin, when will you begin the landscape design portion, since I understood that you will need brownfield analysis first? Is that correct?
The landscape design portion will happen around the summer of 2021. We need the assessment to happen so that we can understand what soils can be mixed or not mixed, if I'm remembering correctly, right, Dan?
Yes.
Okay.
Are restrooms under consideration for the site if it is approved as a brownfield?
If restrooms are constructed on the site, they would be close to the parking lot, and that decision is independent of whether or not this site is designated as a brownfield.
I think we need to say too that designated in as a brownfield doesn't necessarily limit the use of this land.
Right.
The county is we're going to zone this potentially or as a open space recreational area. The brownfield designation is not pushing that. That's something that would be happening, making this a stormwater conservation area and passive park anyway.
Was it necessary for the county to seek brownfield funding, or did the county decide to seek this funding on its own?
Well, it's not, I guess, necessary for us to seek the funding, but there's no good reason not to. The county has a very long history of successfully using brownfield funding to clean up sites. And this seemed like a prime time to use it.
And would you be hauling any dirt off-site?
More than likely, yes. Some in the normal construction phase of reshaping the ponds, and then probably some contaminated material as well.
All right, we have no more written questions. So if someone wants to raise their hand or hit *9, we can look at some comments.
Susan, we have a question from Debbie Linder. Debbie, if you would like to ask your question, I just unmuted you, and you probably need to unmute yourself as well.
Yes, I was wondering if there was any possibility that you could put up like a basketball court to be played on, because all the schools have been closed off and the kids or even adults don't have access to a basketball court or sand volleyball court or anything like that, if there would be space for something like that.
That is something that will be decided upon and around the summer of 2021 as we put together our design plans for the site.
Thank you.
And just to piggyback onto what Jennifer said, there's going to be a totally separate public engagement process for the actual design of the park itself. All right, so that's outside of this effort. This is, as Dan said, we have an obligation to clean up this property, whether it becomes a brownfield site or a Florida Department of Environmental Protection waste cleanup site, which is what it would be categorized without the brownfield designation, because of the condition of some of the soils. So that is a known fact. So we have that piece of it. And then we have the part that you guys are really excited about, which is actually the development of this park and enhancement of the stormwater facilities and just making the space more beautiful. And so there will be more opportunity to look at design options and provide feedback on all of that, separate from this effort.
Susan, we have a question from Rocco Totino. I hope I didn't botch your name, sir. And if you would unmute yourself, you can ask your question. Rocco, you may need to unmute yourself.
Okay,
There you go.
great, thank you. In the construction phase, do the ponds need to be drained?
No, but tonight we're trying to focus on the brownfield
Okay.
situation. And that's fine. I answered some questions earlier, but right now we're just trying to gauge support of the brownfield designation. Thank you for asking. We can address that later.
Thank you.
I do want to add that there were some questions about the park design that we weren't answering today. It's just like we said, the goal is today is to talk and focus on the brownfield designation.
At this time, I don't see any other raised hands. We do have a few more minutes. If anybody real quickly would like to raise their hand. Let's see. I still don't see any. Okay. Linda McDowell. And Linda, I've just unmuted you and you may need to unmute yourself.
I just wanted to, this isn't really a question. As president of the Save the Baypointe group, I just wanted to encourage everyone to think about this designation from the standpoint of we have these grants and these monies available to us, and being able to utilize those monies in helping us first and foremost remediate and revitalize the soil and the green space before the design even begins is of a tremendous value to all of us here in the community. As taxpayers, as Pinellas County taxpayers, it will offset some of the budget and some of the cost in the long run for, you know, working on this particular project. And I just think that it's something that everyone needs to embrace as a positive for everyone here in the community.
Thank you, Linda.
Tony, we had another question come in. In what form would you like public support?
Yeah, I don't know that we've got, well, I guess there's the comment form on the Baypointe Brownfield website. If you'd like to show support for that, I guess you could send a comment in through there saying how you felt about the project. That would probably be the best way.
That would be very helpful.
Do we have any more questions in the chat?
No more in the chat.
Okay.
One just popped up.
Excuse me?
One just popped up.
Okay, let's go.
Is the Brownfield designation process a competitive process where reimbursement funds are awarded to the most deserving?
No, not in this case. For federal grants, that can be the case, but right now the state has a set amount of money each year that they use for reimbursement costs for these projects. These are reimbursed on a first come, first served basis. So if you get it in early enough, you get funded that year. If not, you get put first on the waiting list for next year. So it's not a competitive thing. Everyone who applies gets the money. It just may push you back a year if a lot of people apply.
That's all the questions I have, Tony.
Okay. Well, thanks, Susan. The purpose of this meeting was twofold. One, we wanted to inform you about the Brownfield process, and two, we wanted to invite your feedback and input. As Dan mentioned, the best way to let us know what you think is to either fill out a comment card online, email Jennifer or Dan, or give us a call. And I will actually throw up a slide with the contact information in just a second here. Okay. If you go to pinellescounty.org/Baypointe, the virtual informational open house link at the top of the page will take you to all of the Brownfield information. At the bottom of that page, you'll find the link to the comment card. Please fill that out at your earliest convenience. Comments or questions can also be sent directly to Jennifer or Dan by email, and you see the email addresses on your screen. We very much do want to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us tonight. And once again, please share the information we discussed with your neighbors. Good night. Thank you.